I was the king or queen in this case, and I had someone working under me who was supposed to be handling all my stuff, and I see that that's not being handled. What would you do? You know what I'm saying? So the king let him go. What is up, YouTube? This is your girl RaylaMoore, back with another video of Let's Talk, where we encourage, empower, and enlighten. We keep it lit, but we stay enlightened at the same time. Thank y'all so much for joining me for today's video. Y'all, this topic, let me tell you, I think it is so important that we discuss this, and I came across this while reading scripture, and it touched me, it blessed me, let me just say. So y'all, this video is called Faithfulness Before Greatness, and it's often not preached. We often miss the faithfulness aspect in our greatness journey, on our journey that leads us to greatness, that leads us into who we are called to be. So let's get into this conversation. Now, y'all know, for those who watch, that I like to use definitions just to give the video some sort of foundation, laying some groundwork. So I want to define faithfulness, right? And it means true to one's word, promises, vows, etc. Another word for it, reliable, steady in allegiance or allegiances. So throughout Jesus's journey, what he often did was spoke in parables. He told stories, right, to those who he was speaking to. And the reason he did this is because he wanted the people to get these principles in a practical, understandable way. One of the parables he talked about can be found in Luke chapter 16 verses 1 through 12, and he is talking about a dishonest manager. So instead of reading, what I'm going to do is kind of give y'all a synopsis of what took place. There were two major lessons that Jesus was trying to highlight through this parable, but there was one in particular that stuck out to me that goes with faithfulness before greatness, right? So basically, we are introduced to a servant and king relationship, or in this case particularly, a manager and a king. So you had the king at the top, and then you had someone who worked for him, which was his manager. Now, the manager was in charge of the king's affairs, right? Making sure that his business ran smoothly, that everything was straight, the numbers were right. That was like managers do today, right? But the parable quickly turns to a sour note because there is a report that the manager has actually mishandled, mismanaged the affairs of the king, right? So basically, something ain't adding up, okay? What have you been doing with my business? If I was the king or queen in this case, and I had someone working under me who was supposed to be handling all my stuff, and I see that that's not being handled, what would you do? You know what I'm saying? So the king let him go. He was like, oh no, you can't work here. You can't work for me no more. Stuff is not adding up. I don't know what you're doing. You seem a little faulty. So we got to come up with another plan, right? And so aside from letting him go, he was like, oh, and before you leave, I need an account of everything. Meaning, show me some receipts. Well, I need to see the receipts. And so at this point, the manager is kind of like, okay, caught, right? And whether it was intentional mismanagement or he was just being lazy, it's unknown. It's a lot of speculation behind exactly what he was doing. But all we know is that he wasn't handling business. And so the manager gets a little frazzled, and it's like in verse 3, the manager said to himself, what will I do since my master is taking the management away from me? I'm not strong enough to dig. All right. So clearly he had some sort of ailment going on to where he couldn't do physical labor. And I'm ashamed to beg. Okay. So he says, I know what I'll do so that when I'm removed from management, when I'm fired, people will welcome me into their homes. So basically, he's trying to clean house and make sure he leaves on a good note so that when he goes to the next one, he'll be able to, his name will be good. So he then goes, to all the debtors. I believe that's what they're called, right? Yeah, those who owe the money. And basically knocks down their debts, right? A couple dollars, like, let's see. I'll read an example because he does it like 3 times. So he summoned each one of the master's debtors, yes. And he said, how much do you owe my master? He asked the first one. And he replied, 100 measures of olive oil, he said. Then the manager said, take your invoice, sit down and write 50. So you see, he kind of gave him a little discount, but really it wasn't a discount. It was probably what they've been owing the whole time. But because of his mismanagement, he had to go back and, adjust some numbers. And after that, the king ends up praising or, giving him a good job for fixing his faults. He acted, I think it's shrewdly, knowledgeable about what he was doing and went back and did what he should have been doing and did it the right way. So he was praised for that at the end. But there is a message that the Lord was trying to get out of this parable. And that lesson is found in verse 10, chapter 16, verse 10. And it says, whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much. And whoever is unrighteous in very little is also unrighteous in much. So if you have not been faithful with worldly wealth, who will trust you with what is genuine? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to someone else, who will give you what is your own? Now, I thought this was interesting because obviously, although the manager was praised at the end of the parable for doing what was right, the parable starts off with showing the lack of faithfulness of the manager over the king's assets, right? Faithfulness, true to one's word, steady to allegiance, reliable. He wasn't none of that. He wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing, right? And so after reading that in verse 10, it really made me realize that we have to look at how we're serving. We have to look at our own faithfulness to someone else's vision, right? Because the manager, this wasn't his own business. This wasn't his own vision. He was under the king. This was the king's affairs, the king's assets that he was managing, right? But he did that poorly. And I often wonder how many of us complain so much about us not making it or wondering when it will happen for us, when we will reach that pinnacle of greatness, when we will get our break. I wonder if we ever stop to consider how we're serving the moment and the time that we are in at that time. Does that make sense? Because I think oftentimes when we get to those places of frustration and anger that we haven't reached where we're trying to go, it makes us lackadaisy in serving someone else. You know what I mean? I think it makes us irritated. It's irritable to serve someone else when we're trying to get our thing off the ground, get our vision up and running, and it just doesn't seem to be happening. But you have to also remember that how you serve someone else is just as important. I'm a firm believer that you reap what you sow. And if you're sowing negativity, if you're sowing dishonor, if you're sowing lack of faithfulness, right, into someone else, into someone else's vision, into someone else's idea that they welcome you into, I absolutely believe that that has a direct impact as to why your vision or, maybe the dreams and the goals that God has given you probably aren't happening. That may be the reason. And of course, in this story, this is talking about someone doing manual labor, right? He's managing the king's assets, but this can be in pretty much any area in life you can think of. I'm looking at a lot of cars right now. So take your first hoopty, right? You know, usually when you get a first car, it's not the greatest car or whatever the case may be. You know, maybe a little tick tick, little bang bang, you know, whatever. You know, may not be the best car. And I have a friend, I'm not gonna put their name out there, but they love to drive on E. And I could not understand, and I would get on them all the time. And it's like, how do you expect God to bless you with something new if you can't value, take care of, be faithful to the hoopty? You know, I really think he pays attention to that, and we don't. We just treat it accordingly. Since we don't really like the car, we wish it was something different. Sometimes those emotions are reflected onto how we take care of it, right? But I think if you can just be faithful, like it says, if I can trust you with this much, if I can trust you with the hoopty, and I know you're going to take care of it and do it as if it was a 2020 GMC, then I can trust you with something new. But if you're treating something old and raggedy like it's old and raggedy, then what you gonna do with the new? Same principle with money. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't a person who always paid my tithes, but when I was encouraged to, I had to learn that just because I wasn't making much at my job did not mean that I didn't have to honor God with what he had given me, because he is the source and the job that I have is the resource. So I don't care if my check is $100. The Lord is like, can you honor me? Can you at least say thank you and honor me with your with what you get financially, even if it's just 10? He only asked for 10%, right? So if you get $100 on your check, can you honor me with $10 by just saying, you know, Lord, I'm sowing this, I'm giving this, whoever you give it to, wherever you give it, I'm sowing this in honor of you. Thank you for the job that I have. Even if it's not all that I want, even if it's not the biggest check in the world, I'm honoring you with what I have. If God sees that, and I'm a living testimony, so I'm not just talking about it, but I've lived it and it has happened to me. If he can trust you with the bare minimum, if he sees that, wow, they're even honoring me, even though that ain't nothing that they getting, then I can trust them with 6 figures. You see how I'm going with this? How we serve. It's important to know what we're faithful over. It's important to be faithful over what we have, because we're so busy trying to get more and more and more that we don't even know the principle of what it means to be faithful over something. And that's dangerous ground to be on, because if you can't be faithful in the bare minimum, if you can't be faithful as a manager, there's no way you can be faithful as a king. And another scripture that comes to mind is also found in Luke chapter 6, verse 38. Now, if you grew up in the church, you've heard this quite often. It's usually, I don't want to say cliche, but we often say it. We say it a lot, okay? But I found it interesting that it's a pretty lengthy sentence, for one, a pretty lengthy verse, but we never hear the second part of the verse. So, this is the part we normally hear. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be poured into your lap. Period. Now, this is the part I don't normally hear, and I find it quite interesting. For the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Now, the first part of verse 38, is kind of vague, because it says give, and it will be given unto you. It doesn't really say what you're giving, though. So I personally believe that it can be applied to anything, whether it be money, whether it be time, energy, love, patience, forgiveness. Give. It doesn't say what to give, so I believe it applies to many things. For instance, in Luke chapter 16, the manager, he gave his labor, gave his time. Not very well, but as you can see, what he gave out, he kind of got back, right? But going back to Luke 6 and that last sentence in verse 38, for with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you. Since I read this, I wonder why we never say that. Why we never finish out that cliched phrase that we say all the time in church, why we don't finish out with that? And I think it's because that one sentence calls for accountability. That one sentence brings accountability to someone, because a measure of something is a capacity of something, is a size of something, is an allowance of something, of some size, some value. So in essence, what it means is that the measure of everyone is different. Everyone does not have the same measure of giving, measure of loving, capacity to love, capacity to give. It only goes, and it's really dependent on the person. And so this sentence, what it would do for me personally, and what it has done since I've read it, is it's made me ask myself, what is my measure? What measure am I giving in? What measure am I serving in? The service of the manager in chapter 16 wasn't that great. His measure was very, very limited. And that caused him to lose his job and have to go back and correct the errors that he made, that he wouldn't have made had his measure been greater, had his ability to serve been greater and more honorable. Because as a result, he then had to take his own measure and swallow it. If you think about it, he had to take his own measure, his own lack of faithfulness, his own laziness to someone else's vision, and had to swallow it. He reaped literally what he had sown, because he hadn't sown excellency. Even if it wasn't for his own establishment, it was for someone else's. And I think that is so important for us to understand, especially those of us who have a vision, who have a goal in mind, who have somewhere of greatness that we're trying to get to and trying to attain, that it is so important to realize that how you serve, the capacity in which you serve, the measure in which you give yourself, it's gonna come back. And it's right there. The measure in which you use, not me. The measure in which I use, not her, but the measure in which I use, that same measure is going to be brought back on me. And like I said, that giving, it applies to so many things. It applies to how you love. It applies to how patient you are. It applies to judgment. Oops. That's a hard one. Yes, how you judge someone, the measure in which you judge someone, and Lord knows we are good at it. We can judge someone up and down without even having to hear a word that comes out of their mouth. That level of judgment, that's coming back to you. That's coming back to you. So why do it? Why do it? And as I'm preaching to y'all, I'm preaching to myself. Because you got to understand, when I'm on here, y'all, I'm not giving you things that I'm so perfect at. Heck no. I am learning these things too. And so this video ultimately is to encourage those who may be growing weary of everything that you've been doing, and how you've been serving, and how faithful you have been in your season, how faithful you have been at your 9-to-5, how faithful you have been in your hoopty, how faithful you have been serving under someone else's vision when you have a vision of your own. I'm encouraging you to keep going and to serve well. Serve the season that you are in well. Serve whatever king or boss you are under well. Treat everything around you as if it costs $1 million. Serve it well. Take the little paycheck you have and serve well. Keep doing what you are doing. And for those who are not serving faithfully, those who are serving with attitudes, those who cannot honor those who have given them an opportunity to have a job, those who have dishonored someone else's vision, those who have dishonored the things that God has given you, even if it's not what you want when you want it, I would hope that this video teaches you not to get fired. Like that manager who wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing. In the meantime, write the vision, make it plain. Bring your vision and your ideas to God and make sure that he not just signed it, but that he co-signed it. Make sure that he kisses it and just relinquish it to him. Because I have ideas right now that are too big for me. Meaning that I know I can't just do that by myself. Like, Lord, I'm going to need contractors. I'm going to need grant writers. I'm going to need all this stuff. And I don't know how to get none of that. So I had to submit all of the ideals, all of the businesses, all of the programs to him. And whatever is meant to be, whatever is meant to happen, I'm going to let him handle it. And ask for his direction along the way. While I'm going to work. While I'm serving someone else. While I'm doing this. And serving those who are watching. In the meantime. And doing it as if I'm talking to 1 million subscribers. Because one day, I might. But if I'm not faithful in my little 34 followers or subscribers, then why would he give me more than that? It's just something to think about. But I love you guys. I'm done. My spiel is done. Okay, I'm getting hot because this hair and this sweater has got me hot. So I'm gonna go. But I love you guys. As always, any scriptural reference I use will be in the description, so you can go and read for yourself, which I always encourage you to do. And of course, don't forget to come back and see me here at Let's Talk, where we encourage, empower, and enlighten. We keep it lit, but we stay enlightened, y'all. We gotta stay enlightened. We gotta stay with some substance. So I hope and pray that everyone is having a beautiful and blessed week. Can't talk no more. Lord help me. I will see y'all in the next video. Okay, stay tuned for the prayer. We all need prayer. So stay tuned for that. God bless. Lord, I thank you for this day. I thank you for your grace and for your mercy. And also I thank you for another opportunity to speak to your people, oh Lord. And I just pray that everyone under the sound of my voice, oh God, that this message touched them in a special way, that it helped them to take something out of it that they can apply to their lives. Oh Lord, I pray that you would help us and teach us to serve our seasons well. Oh Lord, I pray that you would reveal to us how it requires faithfulness. Greatness requires faithfulness first, oh Lord, and that everything that we sow, we do reap as well. And so I thank you for this word. I thank you for your love and for your covering over all of us. And I thank you in advance for all that you're going to do in the lives of those listening in. In Jesus' mighty name, I do pray. Amen.